Hi again, Greg Hughes from 90 Second Website Builder. I'd like to talk to you a little bit about the preview function in this software. It's an important part of the design process to make sure that you can see what your website's going to look like as you're designing it. You want to see what it's going to look like inside a browser. Of course, as you're designing your site, like you can see on my screen right now, you're in what's called design mode or working on the canvas. We're in the actual software of 90 Second Website Builder. And so this is where we do all of our dragging and dropping and editing. But to see what the website's going to look like in a browser, I have a shortcut for that. And in most of my videos, you'll hear me say, hey, I'm going to click F5 to see what this looks like. And that's really the shortcut to previewing in a browser. So when I click F5 on my keyboard like this, the software will generate this page into a browser window. So you can see what your website's actually going to look like when people are looking through whatever browser they're using. Now, one of the things I do is I kind of like to stretch that window around because people look at it in different size windows, different size screens. I kind of like to see how my page is going to behave when I preview it in a browser. Now, in my case, you'll notice the browser that came up was Firefox. That's because that's the default browser on my computer. And yours will be different. If you don't use Firefox, maybe yours will default to Internet Explorer or Google Chrome or whatever you like to use. But the software will find your default browser. Clicking F5 is actually just a shortcut. There's another way to do this. What I'm really doing, in essence, is I'm going up to the File menu and selecting Preview in Browser. And when I click this link, same thing happens. It previews the website. There are some other settings, though, you should know about in using Preview that are pretty important. So when I hover over this Preview in Browser, you see there were some other things that came up in the menu. It's showing me that it's using my default browser. It's also showing me that I could preview this in Internet Explorer instead of my default browser. And the reason I can is because at one point I added this browser to my browser list by going here. Click Edit Browser List. And you can see I added Internet Explorer by locating it on my computer and telling the software to do that. You can do the same. You can add a number of browsers. You might, like I said, you might have Google Chrome, so you might want to add this to your list, and you would do that here. So it's actually a good idea to preview your work in multiple browsers just to see if your website is going to be compatible with more people. But there's another feature here that's really important to know about, and it's called Preview Entire Website. Now, by default, the preview feature doesn't preview the entire website. It only previews one page at a time, and for a very good reason, and I'm going to explain that to you. So let me show you. First of all, when I click F5, you'll see that what comes up is just the page I'm looking at. And I'm not really online. I'm actually just looking at this offline through a browser. You can tell because there's no URL. If I was online, this would be a web address. But this is just an address to this temporary preview file, which is being stored on my computer. Again, it's temporary because when I close it, it's going to go away. Or actually, when I reboot, it's going to clean up and go away. These are just temporary files, and that's really important. And the reason why that's important is because sometimes you'll be working on your website, and I'm going to move the camera over here so you can see in my site manager, this particular website that I'm working on right now has 4 pages. Now, one of these pages I'm not really using. I'm not going to publish this page. I'm just kind of using it as a demo and doing some testing with it. But the rest of these pages are actually going to be part of this website. And in fact, I'm linking to them. So this page, Plans, looks a little bit different. It shows hosting plans for this particular website. And the link to that is in my navigation. If I go down to Plans, there's a link there to compare hosting plans, and it goes to this page. But the problem is, if I click F5 and preview this index page that I'm working on right now, and I think to myself, well, I want to see how that plans page looks. I'm going to go link to that, and I click here, you'll notice that it can't be found because there is no such page as plans being generated temporarily. I have to tell the software to do that. So if I want to test multiple pages when I click F5, I simply go up to File, Preview in Browser, and I tell it to preview the entire website. So I'm going to click on that, and you'll see that it has changed in that it shows a little kind of a yellow square around the icon. That means this is enabled right now. That means when I click F5 on my keyboard, the software is going to actually generate all of the web pages so that I can look at all of them. Okay, so let me do that really quick to show you how that works. Now when I click F5, it took a little longer, you notice. That's because it just generated 4 pages. Here's my index page. And if I want to look at my plans page, it'll actually take me there. Here's my plans page. Here's another page I'm working on called support, and it will take me there. That's really handy. And you might ask, well, then why don't we always do that? Why don't we just have it always generate the whole website? Well, here's why. You'll notice when it generated the pages, it took a little bit longer than when it was just generating the index page. As your website grows, what if you had 50, 60, even 100 pages? Every time you click F5, the software is going to have to regenerate the entire website for you to preview it. So it's not something you want to always use. If you want to very quickly look at a page without having to wait for the entire website to be generated in a temporary preview, well, you just want to be able to click F5 and see that one page. By default, it will just preview the one page. And I want to turn this off right now because that's how I want to normally keep my preview setting. Another important thing to remember when using preview mode is that not everything can be previewed until it's actually published. I'm going to show you an example by going to the bottom of this page. I have a little HTML snippet right here. This is some code. I used the HTML tool to put some code in here, which is just one of the tools in the toolbox. This code comes from my merchant account, the company that helps us process credit cards online. They give us this little security code. And so what I did was I pasted it in using the HTML tool. And so in design mode, it just looks like this. It just looks like this sort of weird object. But when it's actually viewed online or even in preview, we can see what it's going to look like. So let me again hit F5, preview this page in a browser, and now I can see what that little code's actually going to look like when someone previews, or rather when someone views this online. Even though I'm not online, I'm previewing this through a browser, and you can see this little piece of text and this little icon as well as this link was all provided by my merchant account provider. They just gave me that code snippet and I pasted it in. And this is what it actually looks like when it's previewed and when it's published. Some things have to be viewed through a browser to see what they're going to look like, and that's an example of that. So it's really handy to be able to hit the preview button as I'm laying this out and as I'm deciding what this is going to look like. And then there's a third stage. Some things can't be seen in the design mode, like that little code snippet. And some things can't even be seen in preview mode. They have to actually be published. Now that's rarer, but it does happen. So if you're working with a page that's got some complex code, maybe some PHP form, in order for you to really test it, it just needs to be published onto your website, and then you can work with it. So as you're designing your website, it's important to know you have these three stages. You have the design mode, what we're looking at right now. You have the preview mode, which is an offline view, but it gives you an idea of what it looks like in a browser. And then you have your published mode. And as I'm building a website, I'll often publish my website to a server, look at it, and see what it's going to look like. And if I don't like what it looks like, I just republish pages or images or whatever I want to make my changes. It's important for you to know that when you publish your website, you aren't necessarily done. You can publish and republish and make all the changes you want, and that's part of making the design look right for your audience. And it's just one of the ways we've made 90-Second Website Builder easy to work with, because at the push of a button, basically, you can publish, and at the push of a button, you can preview offline, so you can see how well you're doing while you're building your website with 90-Second Website Builder.